Hello, my name is Emily Corcoran. Thank you very much for allowing us the opportunity to present the work that ICRI has been undertaking to ensure inclusion of coral reefs within the CBD Post2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. In this presentation, I'd like to talk a little bit about why ICRI is engaging in the CBD process and how this is being done. I'll introduce the recommendation that has been adopted by ICRI for consideration in developing the Global Biodiversity Framework, and also share some aspects of the work that we will be undertaking to support the next steps of this process. As a result of this presentation, we'd very much invite any feedback or discussions on if and how we could support delegations from this region as you prepare for forthcoming negotiations under the CBD. The International Coral Reef Initiative is a global partnership between nations and organizations that strives to preserve the world's coral reefs and related ecosystems. One role the ICRI partnership plays is to develop coordination and consensus building in relevant policy areas. The ICRI Secretariat is hosted for a determined period, normally 2 years, and currently hosted by the governments of Australia, Indonesia, and Monaco. I've provided contact details on the screen if you would like to find out more about ICRI or ICRI membership. It is worth noting that the 44 countries that are members to ICRI are custodians of 75% of the world's coral reefs, and all but one are party to the CBD. As you can see, there is strong overlap of ICRI membership with this region, with 15 Caribbean countries being members to ICRI. The value and benefit that healthy coral reefs provide is something that this region is keenly aware of, as well as understanding, of course, the consequences of coral reef degradation. Reef-based tourism is an important revenue stream, providing between 10 and 15% GDP for the region. The value of shoreline protection estimated to be valued at $2.2 billion per year, and coral reef associated fisheries providing net annual revenues of over $300 million. Degradation of the reef system will mean increased risk of storm damage, increased flooding, and reduced productivity, decreased revenue, and increased costs. Global assessments, including those by IPBES and IPCC, have repeatedly demonstrated that coral reef ecosystems are highly valuable and critically vulnerable to both global and local stresses. Averting ecosystem collapse in order to sustain these benefits will require coherent and urgent action. The new Global Biodiversity Framework, whilst it will not be a silver bullet, does provide an important opportunity to set a unifying framework for action to enable recovery and restoration of healthy, functioning reefs. It has to be ambitious if it is to achieve the goal of living in harmony with nature by 2050. The recent publication of the Global Biodiversity Outlook 5 in September reported that none of the HE targets had been met. HE target 10, which was the target relating particularly to coral reefs, had perhaps the worst results. Hard coral cover being shown to decline in many regions and key pressures continuing to increase. It is particularly notable that HE Target 10 struggles with a lack of available and meaningful indicators. Strengthening our ability to detect change will help increase accountability and communication of both targets and goals under the new framework. In 2018, ICRI members agreed that it would be critical to engage with the post-2020 process and contribute to the development of the Global Biodiversity Framework. Within the context of ICRI, an ad hoc committee was established, and it was the aims of those that ad hoc committee to coordinate ICRI's engagement in the CBD process, propose and draft a recommendation for how coral reefs could be prioritised, and then to communicate that recommendation. The ICRI ad hoc committee has been engaging through the Post2020 process through contributing written submissions, engaged in consultations and virtual sessions. We have held bilateral meetings, webinars, side events and virtual dialogues with parties, as well as colleagues involved in the development of coral-related indicators and monitoring, such as the Global Coral Reef Monitoring Network, UNEP World Conservation Monitoring Centre, and also the Biodiversity Indicator Partnership, to make sure that any recommendation that came forward would be appropriate and feasible to implement. ICRI considered and adopted a consensus recommendation in May 2020. This outcome represented 18 months of consultation across countries and with technical experts. There are three main elements of the recommendation I'd like to highlight. Firstly, it calls to look at the text to ensure that the goals and targets take sufficient account of coral reef ecosystems. It calls for ensuring that the goals and targets have appropriate timescales that are ambitious and yet achievable. And it also calls for the inclusion of a set of available, measurable, and meaningful coral reef indicators. The expectation being that these elements will enable visibility, focus, and prioritization of coral reefs in the implementation of the framework, as well as increasing capacity to assess coral reefs globally and increase accessibility and coherence of information and knowledge. It is important to re-emphasize that this process to draft and adopt the recommendation was highly collaborative, and there are many countries that have already made important contributions, both in shaping the recommendation and also how it is being applied, in order to produce something that is useful as a basis to inform their positions regarding coral reefs under the Global Biodiversity Framework negotiations. In order to communicate the recommendation, the ad hoc committee has translated the text and key resources to increase accessibility, and much of the preparatory work has been submitted to the Post2020 consultation process and shared both with ICRI members and CBD focal points. This information and a range of other resources and assets and infographics are available on the web portal, which I have on the screen now with the web page. And I highly encourage you to take a look at that. There are a growing number of leaders that are speaking out in support of the recommendation. These voices come from a range of perspectives, including those who depend on the reef, those with national responsibilities, and also those involved in regional and global implementation. You're warmly invited to contribute your voice. If you're interested, please follow up with the ICRI Secretariat, and we'd be very happy to work with you to do that. The adoption of the ICRI recommendation was a critical step. It has provided a coherent voice and enabled ICRI to engage with and contribute to the CBD process. It is encouraging that at this stage of development, all 6 of the indicators that have been recommended by ICRI are included in the current draft monitoring framework presented for consideration of the CBD subsidiary body on scientific, technical and technological advice at their 24th session. However, there is still work to be done to ensure that marine and coastal ecosystems are sufficiently represented in both the goals, targets, and also the monitoring framework. From this point of the post-2020 process, we're entering the negotiation phase. From here, it really is the role and responsibility of parties to the CBD to ensure a successful outcome for coral reefs, and it is your voices that count. ICRI, of course, remains committed to the post-2020 process and will continue to work through the ad hoc committee to contribute a voice for those that depend on coral reef ecosystems. This slide highlights some of the priority actions we envisage for 2021. We will continue to look at the recommendation and provide supporting evidence, including on the use and feasibility of implementing the recommended indicators. We will continue to develop policy briefs and talking points to support negotiators and ask that parties include reference to this key ecosystem in their statements and interventions. We will also keep working through the regional Cs and bilaterally to engage with countries to help ensure the recommendation of the 44 ICRI member countries is realised. I'd like to thank you for your attention. I've provided some contact details here, and we really very much welcome the opportunity to talk further with you or respond to any questions. Thank you for your time.